Just eating away, are you? Hi, Giselle. How are you? Hi, Giselle. How are you? Hmm? Hey, are you missing out on something? Are you missing out on something? Just keep cool today. Hey. Nice hairdo. Just a do. Nice do. Nice do. Here comes another one. Did you find some bugs? So we put some manure in here and they're just loving digging through it all. In their little habitat. Just lots of shade, doesn't it? Eh? Can you see? Can you see out of that hairdo? Hey? Yeah? Yeah? You don't have quite as fluffy a head. They are digging. Digging in the manure. Just loving it. There's all kinds of worms and bugs in there, isn't there? Yeah, all kinds. Yeah. There's a little one over there. Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. It is the hottest day of the year so far. It's hot and humid and perfect for repotting a ficus. I'll be planting my very first bonsai, a Ficus microcarpa that I grew from a seed in this large 3D printed pot that Stephan sent me from Germany. I don't think it's necessary, but just for safety measures, I'm adding this hardware cloth in the bottom of the pot, and that'll distribute the load of the soil and the tree more to the outer edges of the pot where it's stronger. I checked the long-range weather forecast and it looks like it's going to be warm and humid for at least another week, which is really important for the roots to recover after repotting. In the last few days, I've been bringing out my tropical trees from the plant room outside, and I've got some benches set up in the shade here. And once they get used to the shade, then I'll move them into a little more of a sunny spot, and then eventually full sun. And this whole process usually takes almost a month to get them from indoor light to full sun. My ficus is in the greenhouse here, so let's get it out so I can begin work. Here we are. The greenhouse is quite full now. So it's in the back corner there, so I'll have to move some trees out of the aisleway and around it so I can get it out. Okay, here it comes into the sun. I did repot my ficus this winter. I root pruned it, got all the roots sorted out nice and radial and balanced, and everything I could do to them to get a nice root base on the ficus. And I piled the soil up kind of high around the root base, so I could comb away some of that today when I repot it. I don't think I'll need to do much root work because it was just done maybe three, maybe 4 months ago. So they should be okay, but we'll check it. I am going to mix up new soil for the tree, brand new soil, so there's no problems with weeds or fungus or anything like that, and the tree will be really happy in it. With the warm weather coming now, it's going to be time to plant all those seeds I've collected over the last year, and Tom from Grow and Clip Bonsai for Seniors has sent me more pots, the plastic pots for bonsai, and these are going to be great for starting seedlings in, transferring small seedlings into bigger pots. They're really good, just in time for planting season. Tom also sent me a bag of fluorite. It's dark fluorite. This is used in the bottom of aquariums. I think it'll be really interesting to use as bonsai soil, so I'm going to experiment around with that in an upcoming video. And just in time for seed planting season, Gilbert from Spain sent me a whole box full of seeds. He sent me Chinese wisteria, date palm, canary date palm, oleander, honey locust, pine silk tree, a gum rock rose, ginkgo, cedar of Lebanon, southern catalpa, stone oak, cork oak, almond tree, a bitter variety, Mediterranean pine, and a dwarf mountain pine, the seeds. So that is going to be really awesome. So I've got a whole giant box full of seeds to plant. I'll have to start a garden somewhere that's caged in so the rabbits and birds can't get at it, and squirrels. So that'll be upcoming in an episode soon. I want to thank Tom from the YouTube channel Grow and Clip Bonsai for Seniors. He's always sending me presents and I always appreciate them. Thanks, Tom. And I also want to thank Gilbert and everyone else who sent me seeds over the last year. I hope I can get them all planted. I have a lot of seeds, like probably over 1,000, I would say. So it's a good thing I have a large backyard. I'm going to begin mixing up my soil now. So I'm using my standard soil mix, which is 50% by volume perlite, 50% by volume safety zorb, which is upside down because it has a hole in the bottom there. And I'm going to add the reptile bark that Tom sent me, 100% pure fir bark. I don't know if it's composted, but it'll decompose in there in the soil eventually. I think the reptile bark and these fir barks and that, they have a bit of a antibacterial property to them, antifungal property, I think. But I'm going to add it anyway. And I add about maybe 10 to 20% of that. So that's all I have left. So I'll just add the rest of that to the soil. This pot will take a lot of soil. You can see there's a lot of surface area. It's fairly deep, so I'll have to mix up a lot of soil to fill that pot. I'll get my soil mixed up and then I've got to water all my bonsai. So I'll come back after that and we'll begin planting the tree. I've mixed up my soil in here, and that looks about 50-50 to me. 50% turfus and 50% perlite. So I'm going to add the reptile bark now, and I'll add all of it, and that should be enough soil for this planting. I'll add the fir bark now. The mix looks just perfect to me. The right amount of fir bark, perlite, and turfus. I think that's going to be a great soil. Here's a look at all the stuff I was left over with, all the fines. So I usually scoop that up and put it in the garden as a soil additive. The new bonsai pot has fairly small holes, and I did that on purpose, and I'll explain why. It's kind of an important feature in pots. When you're watering a tree, you want the flow of the water, either from a hose or a watering can, to be greater than the drainage of the pot. And this fills the pot up with water. So it'll actually pool on the surface eventually and overflow. And that's what you want. And that means the soil throughout the pot is getting totally saturated. If your drainage holes, if the rate of water draining out the bottom is greater than the amount of water you're putting in when you're watering it, you'll never fill the pot up with water. So you can get dry spots in there, especially under the base of the roots. Under the base of the roots here, it's kind of flat. All the roots kind of spread out, so water has to get in underneath the root base somehow. And that's why you want your drainage in your pot to be less than the amount of water you're watering it with. That way it fills up with water. Every part of the root, or every part of the soil and the roots are fully saturated with water, and then it all drains out again. So that's my theory behind having, not having giant drainage holes all over in this pot. I want it to be able to fill it up with water. And I don't know if I'll be able to do that with a watering can, but certainly with the hose you could. At the moment, the tree is in a very shallow pot. The new pot over here is probably twice the depth of the old pot, which is good. That'll be good for the health of the roots. The soil that the tree is planted in now is good soil. That's new soil I mixed up, so I don't have to scrape it all away from the roots, because I did that again over the winter. So it's been repotted recently. So my first operation, I'm going to put a layer of soil in the bottom of the pot. And I will need screens. Even though these holes, the drainage holes, are fairly small, they'll still allow soil to come out. So I'm going to cut some screens up, or one giant one, to put in the bottom of the pot, just to hold the soil in there. I guess I'm out of drainage screens on the big roll, so I had to use separate pieces, which looks a little ridiculous, but it's okay. So I'll put a base layer of soil, and then on top of that, I'll put my mesh. So I'm just going to put a small layer for starters, then the mesh, and then a little more. All right, here I go with my base layer of soil. I hope this mesh layer, when I put it in, this one, I hope the roots don't grow around it so much that it's hard to get the tree out. But I don't think it will. I think it'll lift out in one piece. And okay, I'll add my fence mesh in here now. Perfect. And I can fill it up some more, covering all that up. I think overall this is going to be very light when it's all finished, the planting and everything. Okay, that's looking good. The mesh is covered. Just leveling the soil off here. I still have plenty of depth to plant the tree in here. This will be very exciting. Okay, I think that's good. I mentioned before that I'd piled the soil up a little high in the pot just to make sure all the newly pruned roots were in the soil. So I'm going to rake that away now, kind of establishing the proper soil level. And there may be a few fine roots sticking up, but those will air dry and become dead roots. I don't want them out of the root plane like that, so they're kind of useless roots. So that's getting there. It's looking good. I can see all the new fine roots that have grown. I think that's pretty good. I can pull the tree out of the pot now. I'll carefully grab the base of the tree, lift up. There it goes. Now let's have a look underneath and see what the roots look like. Looks good. There's a lot of new fine roots growing. Smells healthy. It looks healthy. So I can just put this right into our new pot now. That leaves me with my nice, good quality Japanese pot available for something else. I will have to remove the drainage screen from the bottom here, so I'm going to tilt the tree off over the edge of the bench so no branches get broken. And then I can get my drainage screen here and pull it off. Like that. Now I can lift the tree into the pot. All right, here I go. So I'm going to offset it over to this side a bit. So that would be on center. So I want to move it over just a little bit to maybe there. I'll have a look at that. Here's a look at the tree in the pot now. So my plans with this tree, you see how there's this thick aerial root off to the right-hand side? It's quite possible in future I'll get more of them dropping down in this area. I have that kind of big thick branch coming off to this side. So I don't want, if I have aerial roots on this side, there'll be just like one, maybe two. But on this side I could have more. So there's room over this side of the pot for more aerial roots. So that's why I have the tree offset to this side, because this side is a little heavier on the tree. So you balance it by moving it over to the left-hand side. Now, I've got to determine, is it shifted enough? Is it too much? Right now, if I look at it, it looks a little too far to the left-hand side at the moment anyway. So I'm thinking of moving it over to the right-hand side just a little bit. So that is maybe a little too far. It looks a little too centered in the pot. So maybe just over to the left a bit. I think that's about right there. I don't have a lot of room to play with it front to back. I think it's fine the way it is. I think it looks balanced in the pot, you know, fore and aft. I'm just going to check, make sure the trunk is straight in the side view. Yeah, that's good there. Now the other thing I can play around with is the rotation of the tree a bit. You know, I can twist it in the pot a bit. There's some room if I want to change the front slightly. So I'm just looking, I'm just moving my head around back and forth here to see if there's a better front view. I definitely don't like it from this side. It makes the roots on the right-hand side look too powerful and dominant. If I rotate it more this way, it definitely looks more balanced. So if anything, I would want to rotate it this way just a bit. All right, here I go with the rotation now. So that's just rotated a few degrees. Yeah, I think that's good. It just sort of lessens the effect, the power of these roots, increases the visibility of the ones on the left-hand side, and the whole tree looks quite nicely balanced at the moment. So I think that's it. Now we've got to check the height in the pot. That's another critical dimension. So let's get down to eye level here. So here I am at eye level, and I'm looking at the root base to see, is it sticking out of the soil too much? There's lots of possibilities for planting. You can have your soil surface flat and level with the pot, and then just the tree rising out of it, which always looks good, I think. You can have your tree slightly mounded, so you know the roots come down and then the soil continues to taper to the edges of the pot. That can also look good. It's a different feeling. It looks more like a tree growing on a hill rather than, you know, on flat surface. And it's just a matter of what you prefer. There's no right or wrong to this, to any planting. It's what feels good to you and looks good to you. That's the most important thing. I'm going to be the one looking at this tree every day for maybe the rest of my life. So as long as it appeals to me, then it's good. So I think that soil level is pretty good. It seems to taper nicely. And if you can kind of continue that line, it comes out to the edge of the pot, which looks pretty good. That's usually what makes a tree look really planted in the pot, is that the roots come down and there's sort of a theoretical line that intersects the edge of the pot. Now again, this tree has a lot of growing to do. At the moment it's too small for this pot, but it's going to grow over the years. So as I said, it's designed to fit this pot in, you know, maybe 5-10 years, but maybe it'll come even sooner than that. Depends how it grows. So I think I'm happy with everything. The height, the position of the tree, the orientation of the tree. I think I can fill in the rest of the pot with soil. I'm going to rake out just the edges of the root mass here, just so there's no, you know, roots circling around or anything. It sort of will help integrate the old soil in with the new soil. So I think that's all looking really good. Make sure there's good contact with the new soil, which looks good. And I can fill in the soil now. All right, here I go. I'll start at the front here. Just more on this side. People have asked me about this thick root here. It's a nice shaped root. It started off as a very thin, twisty aerial root that kind of went across the surface of the soil. And I liked it because it had fantastic movement. If you look at mature ficus, they don't have a perfectly even radial root base. You do get these long, thick, meandering roots that come out. I've got one here, a fairly thick one here. By pruning the ends of it, you can maintain so it doesn't get too thick. You want to control the size of it by pruning the end of the root. And I think it looks realistic. I think if you had every root the exact same thickness, it would look artificial. So that's the reason I've kept that root. It doesn't bother me. I think it, if you look at pictures of mature ficuses, there's often big thick roots coming off, going across the surface of the ground. So I'm keeping it for now anyway, and it can always come off in the future if it starts to bother me, but at the present time I think it looks very natural and realistic. And it's funny, your taste in bonsai can change over the years. Like I've mentioned this before, that when you first get into bonsai, that literati style, it doesn't appeal to too many people. It's sort of looks a bit strange and bizarre. But to me, some of these literati styles are perhaps some of the closest styles of a pine tree that you'll see to one in nature. There's a lot of pines in nature with slim trunks like that are very old and have very sparse foliage on them. So yeah, your style in bonsai can change over the years. A tree you might like when you started into bonsai may not be one you like as you get more into the hobby and study trees more. And so I always say, at the present time, this doesn't bother me. Maybe in the future my taste will change, who knows. All right, I'll start filling around the side here, at the back. Because the tree is going into a larger pot, it's deeper, it's wider, it's longer. There's a lot more soil in here and a lot more room for the roots to grow. I think this year you'll see this tree just take off. It'll grow really vigorously. It'll have super large leaves because there's no constriction of the roots at all. And it'll be really good for the health of the tree and for growing the canopy larger. But for the refinement of the tree, I'll have to be careful that the growth doesn't get too coarse. I'll have to prune it more often, kind of keep the vigor under control. I'm ready to water the tree, and before I water it, I'm going to take a good look at it, make sure everything's in the right position. My trunk looks vertical. I like the position in the pot. I think everything's good. Yeah, I think everything's good. So I'm going to water it with rainwater, of course. I've been using rainwater from my cube here. I'll show you how that works. I just come in here with the bucket, position like this, and I crack the valve open. And close it. I am getting a valve for this eventually. It'll screw on here and then there'll be a tap on it. I like the flow rate of the big one, but I don't want to break this plastic valve here, so it'll be a metal valve eventually. Up goes my bucket of water. There it is. So I'll put my 2-liter Haas watering can in here, fill it up like that, and then I'll add a bit of fertilizer. In the past, I've always used Plant Prod 20-20-20 fertilizer, but I couldn't get it this year. Canadian Tire no longer carries it, and we're on lockdown, so I can't really go out of town or anything to get anything. So this year, I am using Miracle-Gro Plant Food 20-20-20. It should be just as good. It's It's made by, it says Scott's Canada Limited, and made and printed in the USA. So, yeah. If you put too much fertilizer in your water, you can burn the tender new roots forming. So that's why I only put a small amount in my water, and I do that every time I water. And the amount of fertilizer I use in, say, 2 weeks is about the same as what a manufacturer recommends. So I'm not over fertilizing. I just spread that amount of fertilizer out, so I'm fertilizing every day, very weekly. And I think that's the best solution. That way, if it rains, it doesn't wash all your fertilizer out of the soil. You're always replenishing, the soil with new fertilizer. It also makes it so your soil doesn't have to release the fertilizer from the soil particles. It's always in the water. So maybe that's why I can use turfus and perlite, because I'm watering and fertilizing every day. And I only do it every day. Some days I have to water the trees, like on a really hot, dry weather. I have to water them 2-3 times a day. So I just fertilize it the one time, and the other times I just use straight water, rainwater. Here's the amount of fertilizer I use. I will use about that much on the tip of my spoon, mix it with my 2 liters of water, mix it up, and that's it. And I water that, or I use that solution on the trees every day. The only exception is pines. I don't start fertilizing those until the needles have come out and hardened off. Otherwise you get great big long needles on the pines. And that can be true for any species, spruce too. You can let that new growth elongate, harden off, and then you can start fertilizing. So if you fertilize in spring with some of these species, you get really large leaves, really rampant growth. So sometimes it's best to start fertilizing after that first flush of leaves is hardened off. There's plenty of time for the tree to get, its nutrients, its nitrogen and all that for the rest of the year. All right, here I go with the first watering in the new pot. And I'll have to give it lots of water so it's, all the particles have absorbed as much water as they can. So I'll water it several times over the next couple of hours. Especially these chunks of fir bark. They take a while to absorb the water, so you need to water it a few times in a row to kind of get them soaking up the water. So it's starting to come out the drainage holes now. So that's it for the first can of water. Here's a look at the water collecting under the drip tray here. Just perfect. So my plan is to plant moss underneath here, and it won't grow everywhere because it's too dark in the middle, but it'll certainly grow around the edges here. So I may put a layer of turfus, and I may even glue it down. I found in my other pots that, because it's very thin, this tray, that when you water, sometimes it washes away. So if I were to glue a layer of turfus to the bottom here, and then put my moss on top, nothing would wash away. I think it would be a really good solution. So I might try that. I'm going to lift the top of the pot away from the tray now. This pot could be displayed without the under tray. It doesn't have to be there. It looks fine without it. But it's a nice feature. It kind of catches that water and gives it a more realistic look because it shows the ground underneath the pot. If I were to glue gravel or turfus or something to the tray, I have to be careful of the corners because I got to leave clearance for the pillars to fit over top of their square pegs there. So I'm wondering, maybe that's not such a good idea to glue it down permanently. I'm going to try a layer just as it is and see how it goes. I think I'll put it all back together and do the tray with the pot on top. That'll avoid all the problems of turf getting under these feet and that. Like that. The turf on the tray, I don't need to sift it because, you know, having different particle size will look more realistic, look more like miniature earth. So here I go. I've got the turf under the pot here in the tray. It's all looking good. So I'm going to wet it, just see what color it is, see how it looks. So I'll do that next. Because the tree was just repotted today, it's really important to keep the tree misted so, you know, the leaves don't have to work, the roots don't have to work as much, cooling the tree. So I'm going to mist the tree and then underneath the bottom tray. So here I go. Now I'll give the tree a watering once again, and that should drip down into the tray and fully saturate that turf under there. That'll probably wash my fertilizer out a bit, won't it? But it'll get fertilized again tomorrow. There's no problem. We've had a very dry spring this year, which is good for my concrete pad. It'll be nice and dry for the trucks to get in here, but not so good for moss. I normally get my moss from the cracks in the sidewalk here, but you can see there is moss there, but it is just dried up. So it's not green and lush. Now I could peel that off, and with watering it would come right back in probably 2 or 3 days. So I might do that. I might scrape some of this good moss off and plant it and see how fast it greens up. We will be going to get more manure today. So another load. I've used some of it in the front garden here. So you can see I've kind of piled it all around here, and then I'll put wood chips over top of that. That should keep the moisture into the garden, especially in this dry spring. My ginkgo tree is coming into leaf, which is really good. But I was noticing yesterday that on the trunk here, there was little pinholes drilled in the trunk with sawdust coming out. And that's a boring insect. I think it's, what do they call it? A transparent wing fly or something? I don't know. Anyway, I've never had a tree live through boring beetles attacking it. They've always died. Sometimes a slower death than others, but so that's not good. So what I did this year, I sprayed it down with soap and water, my usual soap and water mixture. That was the first step. And then I got out the dormant oil I use in the orchard, which is vegetable oil, dish detergent, and then water mixed together. And I painted the trunk with that. And I'm hoping it does 2 things. It deters any further beetles coming, and possibly it's gotten into the cracks and killed what's ever in there. I don't know. I haven't seen any more sawdust coming out of the holes yet today. I'm keeping my eyes out. You can see there's a hole right there drilled in. There's another one down below here. So usually that's fatal, which is, I'm really sad because I had the roots sorted out on this tree really well. It hadn't been repotted, so this was going to be the year it would just grow really well. But, so, I don't know, there's a chance it could live, but if it does, this will be the first one that's lived through an attack of boring beetles. The ducks are all keeping cool in the shade here on this hot day. Hello. Here's a look at the moss I collected. At the moment it looks dry and crusty. However, I think once I water it, it should green up. So let's give it some water now. I'll just dip my watering can in the rainwater once again. All right, here I go. I'm rehydrating the moss now. And it should green up and start growing. I've seen moss like this go from dry and crusty to green lush moss in just 2 or 3 days. It's amazing stuff. I'm going to start by planting the moss around the edges of the pot, and then hopefully it'll start to spread inward. And then, you know, for the final look, I would want moss kind of around the perimeter of the pot and then sand around the base of the tree, because usually moss doesn't grow right underneath the tree if it's in like a, unless it's in a tropical rainforest or somewhere. You would have, you know, fairly dry underneath the tree. It doesn't get much rain there. The roots take in any water, so it's very dry at the base of most ficus trees. But out in the perimeter here, you would get, you know, grass or moss growing. For the moss, I flip the moss over like this, and then I just kind of rub off the excess, you know, soil that's underneath it. So it kind of makes a thinner layer of moss. You want to keep some of that original soil in there, but about like that. And then I can plant that one. You want to make sure your moss is pressed down firmly into the soil so it makes good contact, so it doesn't dry out as just a layer on top. On the pot here, there's an inner lip here that I want to show. So my moss level will come up to that little inner lip there. So I may have to adjust my soil level, take a bit away in places to get my moss at the right level. Do some adjustments. But I think it's looking good. I think the moss is greening up already. I think you can see a bit of a green color to it. Amazing. I haven't picked up the tree in the pot to see how much it weighs with it, you know, watered and everything. So I'm going to do that now. So here I go. Feels about the same as a small size tree. As I work away, I'm starting to get a glimpse of what it would look like with some moss on it. And I'm really liking it. I think it would look really awesome. So I'm going to get some more moss. I've used up what I collected the first time. I'll get some more dried up moss and keep applying it around the surface. And then I think I'll put sand in the middle here. And that'll allow the moss to grow into the sand really easily. And it should look really good in a few days. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. Hard to believe this is a 3D printed pot. I've got other ideas for 3D printing. You know how you can get like the Chinese mudmen and that? Well, I thought I'd do like a Western interpretation of that. Maybe a photographer taking pictures of the root base of the tree, or, you know, got his camera pointing up at the crown of the tree, standing underneath the tree. There's a lot of ideas like that. You know, maybe people sitting underneath the tree looking at their cell phones. Yeah, there's so many ideas you can do. You can 3D print people, objects, lanterns, signs, you know, telling what kind of tree it is. You can 3D print a really nice sign that you stick into the soil and it tells the species of the tree. You could have it like the word Ficus microcarpa cut out from the sign. Have it very ornamental looking. There's so many ideas you can do with 3D printing. It's just, you know, we've just scratched the surface so far by 3D printing pots. I'm going to keep working away at the moss and the planting, but I'm going to end the video here. We'll come back in a few days when the moss is greened up and we'll take a look at it then. We'll get some nice glamour shots. So I'll just show you what it looks like in the pot here. Underneath the pot. Really cool. Yeah, it fits in this pot really nicely, and it's just going to get better as it grows a little larger. I'm really happy with the composition of the tree, my ficus tree, in this 3D printed pot by Stephan. I think it looks really good, and it'll just get better in the future as it grows into the pot. That's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.